All right, guys, welcome back to the Treehouse. Today, I have someone incredibly special to me. It is Lucas Miles on the show. So, Lucas is my brother. I'm going to introduce him how the rest of the world knows him. But he has been someone in my life as my big brother that has taught me almost everything. I could list a lot of things, but he taught me how to ride the bike. He taught me how to really be married. He ordained my husband or he was the ordained pastor for my husband and I's wedding. So I could go on and on about how much I adore him, but he is a trusted voice in the American church who has consistently addressed some of the most challenging topics we hear about in theology, politics, culture. He hosts the Church and State with Lucas Miles, incredible show, which was named 2023 Program of the Year. I had the honor of being there when he received that award. And in addition to his newest book, Woke Jesus, the False Messiah Destroying Christianity, he's also an ordained minister since 2004. So he's actually my youth pastor. So I have the great honor and privilege of introducing him to this audience today. So welcome to the Treehouse, Lucas.
Hey, good to be here and definitely good to be with you.
Awesome. So why don't we start out by talking about your latest book? Because I think that is
Yeah.
kind of the hot button I really want to address first.
Yeah. And it's funny because the title, like, unless you see the subtitle, you don't know which way it's going to go. I've had people like that are um, conservative that see that there's somebody who wrote this book, Woke Jesus, and they immediately assume that it's, kind of promoting Jesus as woke. But the
Yes.
subtitles you mentioned is The False Messiah Destroying Christianity. And Woke Jesus is really, I would like to think that it's the definitive guide to understanding wokeism, specifically within the church. I go through the history of it, beginning in the 1700s, kind of working your way forward. All the modern implications of wokeism from critical theory, critical race theory, globalism. We look at kind of critical climate theory. Talk about COVID, talk about vaccines, talk about the whole thing, and specifically the theology of this, and really, and then line it up to the biblical worldview. How does this message from the Christian left? How does it actually stand up to Scripture? And then ultimately, the end of the book is sort of an exploration of what I call this quest for the biblical Christ, really pushing through all the noise, pushing through all the hearsay, all the political talking points, all the identity politics, in order to get to the real crux of the issue, and that is the person of Jesus himself. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's number one on several lists on Amazon still. It's been a bestseller there, and it's only been out for about a month, but published through Humanix, which is Newsmax's publishing arm. They've just been a great partner with me, and excited to bring it to your audience.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's doing super well. To be honest, I'm not through it. I am most of the way through it, but I have it right here. For if this makes it on video, I haven't decided yet if it's going to be on YouTube or not. I don't know if I want to go that deep into my editing realm and capabilities, but uh, Luke, if you could do some, go into in the book, go into really deep history. I mean,
Mhm.
really, really deep. And this is one of those books that, listeners, if you pick it up, you're going to want a tablet, a notebook, a dictionary. It's a really intense read, but you really get to the heart of the matter. But for the sake of this conversation, could you give us a brief history of kind of where wokeism all began?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, just maybe kind of tying a bow on the book section, of it. It's the completion of this, or the creation or intent behind it. In writing this, I had the option of, do I kind of take the more academic approach and put together this definitive guide, or do I, kind of put together the light version that can kind of appeal to mass audience. and
Hmm.
and I really, I don't think that I blended the two. I'd like to think that I created something that's definitive but still can appeal to a lot of people. But you're
Hmm.
right, it's a lot. There's a lot there, and I know that it's not it's probably not the book that you can read in a room full of people where everybody's talking and you're, kind of like trying to multitask and relax a
Mhm.
little bit. It is a, it's robust. It's, really, I really sought out to have something that was as conclusive as possible on this material. And because there's so much here, and the heart behind this is simple. It's that the reason why we've struggled to recognize wokeism in the church, recognize these false ideologies, the reason why we've struggled to refute these ideas is because we don't understand them.
Yeah.
And the reason we don't understand them is because wokeism and critical theory in general is purposefully confusing. The goal is basically to use and misuse language and to change terms and definitions as often as possible to try to throw people off. And so if we're talking about what is the history of this, this term woke, it's got some reference. We could go back to, I think there was some usage of that in the civil rights movement. There was some usage of that actually in music. I think it's a blues music before anything. But a modern implication of it is essentially wokeism is a euphemism for cultural Marxism. That's basically what it is. It's just sort of another way of saying cultural Marxism. And so, what is cultural Marxism? Cultural Marxism is this influence, this evolution of critical theory stemming from the philosophy and really theology of Karl Marx from the late 1800s, kind of how it worked its way in. Wokeism really intersected with the church, or I should say it this way: critical theory intersected with the
Mhm.
church through liberation theology, which was a form of Catholicism and and Marxism. So you took there was a priest named Gutierrez in Latin America that was a fan of Marx, and he was also a priest, and he sought for a way to kind of combine those two things together. In America, it took on the form of Black liberation theology with James Cone. And the history of it matters, but I think where a lot of people are most invested is the more recent ramifications of
Mhm.
this. And we wouldn't have critical race theory if we didn't have James Cone and Black liberation theology. I mean, his work was directly responsible, for the development of critical race theory. We wouldn't have critical race, or we wouldn't have critical queer theory that we have today if we didn't have critical race theory. These
Mhm.
things have been building on each other, and so it's in many ways these critical theories, they're all the same, but they always have a different sort of oppressor versus oppressed framework. So
Mhm.
in critical race theory, it's black versus white. Or specifically they would say white versus black. In James Cone's Black liberation theology, it's white theology against black experience. In liberation theology in the Catholic Church, it's the rich versus the poor. And with Marx, it was the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. In critical queer theory, it is straightness versus queer. Critical fat theory, which is a thing now, is that it is actually just saw a new one today. It's critical librarian theory or something like that. I haven't read the article. Somebody just sent it to me. It was like a whole new thing, basically that I think that libraries are racist or something. How it's set up. I haven't dove into it fully. I'll have to dive into that. But all of it's the same thing. It's just over and over again looking for a new, essentially what communists and socialists would refer to as useful idiots, to be the thing that kind of takes the focus there in the center. But really, it's just an excuse to kind of dismantle the Western way of life, dismantle Judeo-Christian framework that we live in, dismantle America. And so I think that parents, that are very involved in their children's future, that maybe they're homeschoolers, maybe they're just active, parents that their kids are still in public school, but they have a watchful eye over everything. Like, we need to understand this stuff because it has
Mhm.
real life implications, like today, on what your children are learning, what they're seeing in cartoons, what they're seeing in movies, what they're learning at the schoolhouse. And so, my focus of the book is more the faith aspects of this, and then how that worked its way into Christianity to really start distorting the church, because now we have all these woke pastors out there,
Yeah.
and they've gotten to the point to where I think there's a massive divide in the church, almost, if not more so, a bigger divide now than there was during the Protestant Reformation, where churches are split over woke church versus biblical church,
Mhm.
or we could call it historic Christianity. And all of this is really geared to create that division and to, dismantle the influence of the church in this nation.
Wow, wow. Thank you for that framework that you laid. So, I mean, you know that we kind of accidentally ended up in a church that it's hard to say that they're fully woke. I think there are woke participants. I think there's woke elders and deacons at the church that we were going to a while back, just after COVID kind of happened. And for those, those different parents that I talked to, gosh, like, can you speak to how do you know for sure? I mean, going just a couple times to a church
Yeah.
or in a school or, whatever these places of organization, I think of children's camps that they go to over the summer, that you're just kind of sending your kid off in faith that, oh, it's a Christian church or it's a camp at a Christian place. It's totally fine. I mean, can you speak to that? Like,
Yeah.
what do we need to be mindful of? Like, what are the red flags that we can see as parents?
You want to be, you want to be somebody that sees, like, if it's called Christian, that it's safe, or if it
Mhm.
has like the word church in it, it must be safe. It's a good thing. And or if they say, I believe in Jesus, and like that should be okay. That should be, a safe thing. But now you have to ask, like, what kind of church? You have to ask, well, even it's not just denomination anymore, but like, okay, so they're Methodist, but like, what kind of Methodist? Like, are they the
Yeah.
woke Methodists, or are they the global conservative Methodist group? And so those things become a lot more important, even to say, like, and this is, kind of the heart of the book, is like, yeah, I believe in Jesus. Well, which Jesus do you believe in? Do you
Hmm.
believe in the Jesus of Black liberation theology, the Black Christ? Do you believe in the white Jesus of Aryan Christianity and the Nazi party? Do you believe in, socialist Jesus, hippie Jesus, queer Jesus? Or do you believe in like the biblical Christ? And so, it's very easy for this to be deceptive, because you go into a church and they're singing songs about Jesus, they're talking about God, and everything feels fine at first, until you start diving a little bit deeper, and then you start seeing these elements of wokeism play out. It's really important, I think, and in order to be fair to people, that we have to like recognize that wokeism exists on a spectrum. It's not
Hmm.
just like somebody, that it's not everybody who has any sort of woke ideology in them. Like, that doesn't mean they're all like going to like, like these backroom like Marxist meetings trying to take over the United States. Like, in fact, most people who have adopted, elements of wokeism, I think, especially within Christianity, I think they think that somebody like me, like, that this is just, oh, like, nobody's actually trying to take down this nation. Nobody's actually trying to divide the church. Like, you're just, creating all this, conflict that's not really there. And that's because wokeness exists on a spectrum. There are people who are activists, agitators, who are, putting money into specifically creating chaos and disruption in these organizations and within Christianity, within America. A lot of those have connections to communist, Chinese Communist Party. They're connected to, major leftist, billionaires and these sorts of things. We hear the Soroses of the world. But where I think a lot of people are is they've believed these lies that are somewhere in the middle. And
Hmm.
so they've struggled to deal with issues of race. They've struggled to deal with issues of, like the whole George Floyd thing during COVID. Like, that was a major like exposing moment for the church. COVID in itself was a major exposing moment for the church.
Sure.
And the church like wasn't ready for those things by and large. And so you had people that have been, trained in liberal theological Bible colleges, which a lot of our Bible colleges are that way today, and they didn't have a biblical framework to begin with. And these events exposed that, and sort of, gave them opportunity to kind of promote that and encourage them to promote these ideas a little bit more. So what are you looking for? First of all, if you were at the church when Roe v. Wade was overturned,
Hmm.
how did the pastor respond?
Hmm.
Was it acknowledged from the pulpit? Did anybody clap? We had a standing ovation at our church. When Roe was overturned, I was actually at the Supreme Court. I was one of the first probably 100 people to get to the Supreme Court the night that the leak came out that it was going to be overturned. And so, like, this was something that was, as a evangelical, as a believer, as somebody who's pro-life, like, that was an exciting moment, for the nation.
Yeah.
And how did they respond to all of the race conversations? Did they fly the BLM flag? Are they flying a pride flag? Like, those are the obvious ones. Like, if you're going to church and they have a pride flag or they have a BLM flag, like, go home, just go someplace else. Like, I mean, it's time to go elsewhere. If you look at your pastor's Instagram, go back to 2020. Did he have a black square on Instagram supporting BLM? Like, the problem is not if they had a black square. The problem is if now, because it was so confusing, there was so much pressure at that time. A
Sure.
lot of people didn't know what to do. The problem is not that somebody thought, well, I want to support, and be part of the cause here. The problem is after they found out that BLM was not about helping people of color and was not about issues of race and opportunity and these things, that it was really a Marxist organization that was, has already multiple times, there's been a lot of evidence that they've been embezzling money and that, mishandling of funds, misappropriation, buying mansions, all the stuff that we've seen. And that they were very focused on dismantling the nuclear family, which they talked about in their kind of belief statement. And they were also there to promote the trans movement within communities of color. Was another thing that they said themselves on their website. And you found out very quickly, like, this is not what everybody was told that it was. If the pastor still has the black square on Instagram, they're either like just lazy and they've not gone back and gotten rid of it, or they've not been willing to acknowledge it was wrong, or they still don't think it was wrong what they did. And that's another reason to go find someplace else. And I would tell you, a lot of our major pastors in this nation still have a black square on Instagram. They haven't addressed it. They haven't taken it down. They haven't recanted it. They haven't apologized for it. And I think that that's reason to go elsewhere. I think that on a simpler level, churches that identify with social justice, over kind of like gospel focused, messaging, I think you should be leery of them. Social justice is code for critical theory within the church. And at one time during the 90s, like, it kind of made sense. Like, I remember I was starting to get into that to some degree. We were starting to use some of that language. And very, in early 2000s, but it's been seen for what it is now. It's Marxism that is hijacking the church. It's a parasite that's attached itself to the church. If your church said, if you don't wear a mask, you can't come. If your church, forced everybody for 2 years to sit, 12 feet apart or whatever, or if they stopped meeting and it took them until like 2022 to start services again, like, it's probably not a place you should be going. It doesn't mean they're bad people, but it means that there would be some doctrinal concerns because they don't understand and value certain things like free will and national sovereignty and what we'd call sphere sovereignty. I write about in the book, and I can unpack some of that more. But that's at least some of the things that I would be looking for.
That's awesome. What about the church that doesn't do either? It's the lukewarm church that just refuses to pick a side.
So it's interesting. I actually just had this conversation a little bit the other day. So there is a belief that exists, and I see this with a lot of conservatives. So probably even a lot of your audience has heard this before, that basically if a church is a 501c3 nonprofit, then that means that they're being controlled by the government. And these pastors who are biblically conservative, they're just cowards, and they didn't speak out. They didn't get involved. They kept their head down. They were afraid of what was going to happen. And I would say that in 99% of cases, that is a complete, it's a straw man argument. It's a fallacy. That's not really what happened. I am somebody I can tell you that I don't know one pastor who has a biblical worldview that cares about current events and the state of the nation, who was like, man, I want to do something, but I just feel like there's too much pressure and there's too much heat on me right now. I'm going to lay low. Like, that guy doesn't exist in this nation. Like, he's not a real person. He's not out there. And so, and what people are trying to do is they're trying to somehow understand, because they see the problem is the pastors. They know that the problem is the pastors in a lot of ways. And they're trying to find a reason to be able to mentally understand how these pastors didn't speak out. And so they've just determined that there's cowards out there. there's not many pastors who are cowards. There are pastors are actually probably in many cases some of the more people that have more developed thought and confident about what they believe. They're dogmatic in many ways, and they're not cowards. They're just living out their worldview. And those that went woke, they were already leaning that direction, and they just lived it out. Those that didn't say anything, they have a worldview that the church shouldn't talk about these issues. They're living out their worldview. They're not being cowardly. They're deceived. They don't understand the role of the church. They don't understand the role of the nation. They just are ignorant about these things. They've bought, a bill of goods about it. They're completely deceived about it. Very, very few of them are cowardly. Those that are bold, that understand, that are, involved in these things, that they're going to stay involved because that's their worldview. And they probably got, and so COVID and BLM and all this stuff, like it's like putting lemon juice on like food. It's going like, you don't taste the lemon juice, you taste the food comes out more, or putting salt or something on, like the food, the flavor of the food pops out more, and it helps you to be able to see it. So like COVID didn't make somebody a certain way. It just exposed what they were.
Yeah.
So I think that like, there are great pastors out there that aren't politically involved. There's great pastors out there that have bought this lie that abortion and marriage and gender and sexuality, that all these topics are political topics and that the church shouldn't talk about them. That's a lie. These aren't political topics first and foremost. They've been politicized, but they're spiritual topics, they're theological topics first and foremost. And so like that's a deception. And so like those that aren't talking about it, they're living out something that they believe. Now they might be lazy, not wanting to research these things. They might be somewhat blind. They might be a lot of different things, but I think cowardly is not the main way I would describe them, although that's been popular to describe pastors like that before. And that's not a defense of these pastors. They're in the wrong, but they're in the wrong for a different reason than like they're hiding and afraid. They're in the wrong because they were deceived to start with, because they had bad educations and progressive educations to begin with. And these things were never brought to their attention to be something that's important. And so, I don't know if that answers that fully, but like, if your pastor's not involved in these things, I would say that, they might be a good pastor when we're not in wartime, but we're in wartime, like there are people that can sail ships, like when there's no storm. And then there's people that can sail seashells by the seashore. There's people that can sail a ship through a storm. And like, that's the guy that I want as the captain. And so like, if there's no storm, you're probably fine. Like if it's just like, hey, we went to VBS this summer and they did a nice series on the book of Matthew, and like, all that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no condemnation I have for that pastor. But I would say that when we are in a theological storm, when we are in a cultural storm, when we're in a political storm, you need somebody at the helm of the ministry that you're, devoting yourself to, who can actually sail through and navigate choppy, rough waters. Because if you're not feeling that yet, you're going to. And so I would say that it's not that these people are necessarily heretical or terrible people, but if they're not willing or not able to do that now, they're not going to be able to help you later on fully. And so I think that has to come into play.
That's really good. So listeners, find leadership, find a church that can be there in the storm, because we're in a storm. We're totally in a storm right now. And it's not flesh and blood. It's, That's awesome. Okay, so segue into one of your more recent projects that I have a gigantic heart for. Can you talk to us about the American Pastors Project?
Yeah, and I think it's an easy segue, because this is really, in many ways, the solution to what we're talking about. And that is that we have, part of my organization, we have launched this initiative called the American Pastor Project. And this is really a response to wokeism in the church. Just very brief church history here, and I'll try not to go like too in the weeds with it, because I love to geek out on this stuff a little bit, but like every time that there was a church council or like which is basically these main moments in history, like we think of the Council of Nicaea, or in the Catholic Church, you had the Council of Trent. There were basically heretical views that the church, was responding to. It was something that they believed that was happening that was wrong, and it was happening in enough places and often enough and widespread enough that they would hold this council together and say, we have to do something to deal with it. Think about it. It's like a family meeting. It's like going, hey, we're noticing that nobody's doing their dishes anymore and mom has to do them every day. So we're going to hold a council of the
Were you
family
at my
and we're going
house
to talk
last
about
night?
this. Right. Yeah. And so this is how these church councils operated. And so that each time the church council, what they're really doing is they are defining orthodoxy, which is basically just the right teachings of the church. But they were doing so because they were addressing what would be known as heresy, or some sort of false ideology that rose up. And so, like, really, like, we don't do this though very much anymore. Like, denominations kind of still do this to an extent. They're not very good at it, but they try to do it at least. But the American Pastor Project is really a way of like that we're trying to connect with the church globally. Or really, we could say like universally within this nation here specifically right now, where we are calling pastors of every denomination to sign a statement of what we call biblical orthodoxy, where they're adhering to a biblical worldview. So they're agreeing with the lordship of Jesus, the Trinity, heaven and hell, the depravity of man, or some sort of other denominations like would explain this as original sin or something. But that man is inherently depraved, and that we require salvation by grace through faith, through the work of the cross. We have all these different elements of this, in that we have God's created order. God as creator, God is creating a system of order in this world to prevent chaos through righteous governments, through the family, through church leadership. And so we've kind of unpacked these, what I call primary doctrine aspects, that we are asking pastors to sign this. And here's the cool thing for some of your audience, that we define pastor for the purpose of this project very broadly. Christian podcast hosts, Christian radio show hosts, more traditional pastors, traveling worship leaders, really, somebody who's writing children's curriculum or something like that, a Christian author. Any of these people qualify based upon the parameters that we set, and we encourage them to sign. We want anybody touching church or anybody touching Christian doctrine to sign this statement. And in addition to signing that, they are also making a commitment to help eradicate wokeism from the American pulpit.
Yeah.
And so we have regular conference calls with all of our pastors. We have about 400 signers so far. Wow. We just brought on Jason Yates from My Faith Votes to talk to everybody. This week we did a call. We have calls coming up with all sorts of great names. I don't want to drop all of them now. Some of them we're still negotiating times for, sure. but some amazing national thought leaders that are going to be on these calls. I believe we just confirmed Richard Harris from Truth and Liberty, which is a Colorado-based group. He's, I think, our next call that we have. And so, they get an opportunity to ask questions, to engage, to just connect on deeper levels. And we're partnering with some other national organizations with this. Just did a partnership with Liberty University, with the Freedom Center at Liberty University, that's coming alongside of this. We've got some other partnerships in the works. My Faith Votes has been a great partner of ours. This is the cool thing about it is that if you're not a pastor, you can take this website to your pastor. And, if you want to know if your pastor's woke or not, or where they stand on these issues, I don't know a better way than to bring them the website, americanpastorproject.org, and say, hey, what do you think about this? Is this something or have you signed this yet? Or is this something you'd be willing to sign? And if they're like, well, no, I think that was a little extreme for me, I wouldn't sign this, I would say it's time to go find a new church. Because there is nothing in our statement. This is not a political statement. This is not a statement for Trump or DeSantis. We're not trying to push one of those candidates over another. This is a statement for Christian orthodoxy. And this is a statement about protecting the church. elections matter, all those things matter, but I believe that all of that flows downstream from our theology. So we have to start there. So I believe this is bigger than politics in that sense. And so, take it to your pastor, see what he thinks. We also have a church locator on the website. So you can go to americanpastorproject.org and you can see if there's a church near you. Now we're still, not everybody who signs it, their church does, because of our system, it doesn't automatically go in there. So we're literally adding churches almost like daily, some weekly sort of things. And so if you don't see your church yet, then feel free to send us an email or ask your pastor about it. And if they've signed it, we can get them listed and kind of build that database. But it's all denominations. We're hoping eventually to be able to organize the database by denomination, so you could say, hey, is there a Methodist church near me that's not woke? Or is there a Baptist church near me that's not woke? Because we know that people have preferences in those areas. So, and then we're working on a resource page too that's going to be launching with all sorts of just incredible resources of just kind of curating the best information out there on topics such as critical race and trans issue and how to respond to questions about Christian nationalism and all
Yeah.
the stuff that
Yeah.
comes up in this world, so that people have really that kind of database of resources to go to. So that's really the heart behind it. We're in the process of raising about $2.5 million to kind of launch this at the level that we believe that it needs to get out there on a national phase. We've gotten Front Page, Fox Digital. We've gotten all sorts of news coverage so far on it. But if people want to get involved, they can head over to americanpastorproject.org. They can make a donation there. They can commit to, monthly, one time, any of those things. And or they could take it to their church. We also are looking for pastors and people to be, kind of representatives for, like, our first phase is to get a pastor in each of the 50 states to basically be like the point pastor in each one of those states. And so we're going to do separate, more involved meetings with those guys as we kind of keep rolling this out eventually to congressional districts and everything else.
That's awesome, Lucas. Thanks for explaining that. I love the work that you're doing with that. I think it's beautiful. I love having that as a tool to point friends to, and the resources that they can find there as it builds. And it's really cool. And it's fun to see, like, hey, we just saw that you were up on the website. Like, it's really cool to see the map and be able to go on there and like see, I think there was like one or two churches in California when I last looked, when I was talking to a friend in California. I'm like, get your church on the list. They need to
Yeah.
be on there. So that's really cool. Before we go, what is something that you would advise parents raising kids in today's sideways culture
Yeah.
to really, what would you tell them as a pastor, and all the things that you've experienced along this journey of digging through all of this stuff? Like, where's some encouragement to them and maybe some, heads up, like, this is what you need to, watch for and make sure
Yeah.
that you're feeding your kids these things?
Look, if people are in the news cycle, I'm sure they've seen a lot of these things, but obviously you have to be very, very aware of what your kids are, like what input they have, whether it be social media, YouTube, television, streaming, platforms. You have to be very, very aware of that. The commercials, the content within the shows, like if you want to give your kids something safe to watch, like probably go back about 20 or 30 years and
Yeah.
find like older shows that they can watch, like
Bob
you,
Ross.
yeah, growing pains, like
Yes.
that kind of stuff, like old Saved by the Bell episodes. Like if it's like there's a lot of great older content out there that's safe. Now there's newer stuff too that's safe. Like we've connected with some of the guys over at Angel Studios. Obviously, they have a lot of great offerings. They just did the Sound of Freedom, movie, which very, very, very powerful film. Jim Caviezel's been on my show a couple times in the past, and just incredible actor and just individual. There's places like PureFlix. Love giving a shout out to our friend Candace Cameron Bure and the content that she's creating. And I know probably a lot of your audience loves her. There's some great content developers, filmmakers, show creators that are making things that I think are they're safe and they're family friendly, and they might not always be faith-based, but they're positive. They're enriching for kids' lives and not going to be destructive. I think also, like, for me, a big thing is like really like finding a way to incentivize reading. And this is a big one for me, is that If I had, kids in kind of a let's say a junior high school age group right now, I would be looking for a way to get them a Christian classical education. Like
Mhm.
that would be my number one thing that I would look for. And I love homeschooling. I think that if people are very, very, attentive to it and they get good curriculum, it can be a very great experience. And the
Mhm.
kids kind of have to drive that in terms of their ages. You want them to be able to socialize and find those other opportunities, and most homeschool parents are very good at that. But I think that like really look in the material. Like if you have a high school student, they at least should have read something, even if a segment of Augustine.
Mm.
They should read there's like, have they read anything from Plato? Have they read anything like, have they read the Bible all the way through? Have they
Mhm.
like, there's a lot of like like people used to be educated on these works. Like
Yeah.
everybody was going to read Augustine's The Confessions. Everybody was going to read City of God. Everybody was going to read, Plato. It was, these were just sort of no brainers. And we could add, and I've made a list before of 25 books. And if I can find that, I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
for
Awesome.
this, that I recommend. But that's a big part. And I think you have to incentivize it. And I think back to like our dad, like, now they weren't necessarily pushing like, us to read Augustine. But, like, there was opportunities for incentivizing reading. I remember one thing that like our dad did where, he made like, it was kind of like two poster boards like stuck together. I don't know if you have memory of this or not. And it was kind of like when you open up like the advent calendars where you kind of like,
Yeah.
grab the things. So he cut out all this stuff, and it would be like something that we like, it would be like do 25 push-ups, and then you open it up and then there was like, get this, you get a free trip to the batting cages if you do that. Or, if you read the book of James, you get this other thing. And like, it was just fun. It never felt like, it didn't feel like work. It felt like it was learning goals. I mean, look, all of our, you and I, as well as our brother Josh, like we're all very like goal driven
Mhm.
people. And like, I
Mhm.
think that was instilled in us of like the purpose behind that. But I think more than just instilling just the drive for goals in general or success in general, like the pursuit of wisdom is really
Mm.
what matters. Like that's the thing. Like teaching your child how to be like, like we all want, kids that can be independent and can be, high functioning, and they can problem solve and they can do all
Yeah.
these things. Like, yeah, we want all of that stuff. But I would say the thing that we want more than that is we want children that grow up in the wisdom of God, that
Yeah.
they are really equipped with a framework, because you can't forecast everything that's going to come at them. At some point, the next thing is going to be something you've never seen before. You don't
Yeah.
understand. As all of us age, like technology gets, like if you don't stay up on it, like we weren't, our parents weren't preparing us for AI, other than like if we accidentally watched the Terminator movie when they weren't watching or something like that. Like that, but it's out there now. And like the only way you can intersect with it is with wisdom of
Mhm.
how to address it. And so,
Yeah.
that's an important part of this. I think that also, you know, just being aware that there is a fight for like this next generation. Like the
Mhm.
enemy always comes after the children. And I don't want to get, like obviously this with Sound of Freedom movie, and there's all this kind of like, now they're, it's like the world's divided over if like kids are trafficked or not. And of course they are. And
Mhm.
so, but I think you can get into some really crazy conspiracy theories on the far side of that too. And I think that all that's there to like discredit, like, so that you
Mhm.
don't,
Mhm.
it's like if we can get people to all like, if the left can get everybody who's conservative to become QAnon, then anything that's conservative seems radical and
Yeah. Yeah.
something you don't want. And so
Yeah.
I think that we as like conservatives and as Christians, we really have to ensure that, like as scripture says, that we're not given to extremes.
Yeah.
We don't like shape our lives in such a way that we chase after every conspiracy theory, or that we get irate every time we see something. Like how do you love what is good, hate what is evil, rely on the wisdom of God to navigate these things, and then also do what scripture says of seek to live with peace with everyone, when you
Mhm.
can. Like
Mhm.
all of that at times feels like it conflicts with one another. But that's where wisdom comes in, and like we navigate this in a way that isn't just like a check the box. It's very fluid. But I think that that's really the way forward. Like how do you push back against a pride parade? Like you can go up there and protest, or you can, show up and have a prayer booth,
Yeah.
and have people like just see if people will stop by and talk to you.
Yeah.
And don't yell at them. Don't tell them they're perverts. Don't condemn them. Like I can go on the television shows and address the ideologies and how these are wrong thinkings. We don't have, but when you're one-on-one with somebody, like,
Mhm.
can you actually operate in grace and truth at
Yeah.
those moments? Or should I say this way, truth and grace, when
Mhm.
you're at that
Yeah.
spot. And so this is not a time for the faint of heart. It's not a time for those that, have not been well trained. A lot of people are going to struggle through what comes next. But I think that like learning to like, have a real relationship with the Lord, that your faith is cemented on and fixed on him, and that you seek his wisdom on how to navigate this is going to be crucial, not just for the parents, but also training your children in that same way.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I love reminding my kids to put on the armor of God too, because I
Yeah.
think this next generation is going to be really needing all the tools in their tool belt and really knowing how to equip themselves with the Holy Spirit and walking in his strength and power and wisdom is an awesome thing when we have it.
Yeah.
So it's not something that is being taught in schools. You can't really get it there. So it's up to us parents to make sure that we are putting our kids in positions that they can find it. They can grow in that way. So, well, brother of mine, thank you so much for being in the treehouse today. And guys, go out and buy Woke Jesus. Check out Church and State with Lucas Miles. It's on Epoch TV. And check out his other books.
And the
And
American Pastor Project. Yeah.
yes,
American Pastor
yes, get connected with
Project.org.
that. Get connected to the American Pastors Project. Send it to your pastor. Uh, get connected with that. If you're looking for a church or you're unhappy where you are, go there first. Reach out to him. Awesome. Very cool. All right. Love you, brother. Thank you so much
Hey,
for
love you too. And thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to seeing you guys and the kiddos here in a couple weeks.
absolutely. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.